Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. The budget we're talking about today is lacking in actual substance. In the TCCS area, there's small amounts of money to many areas. I see this as generally replacing money that's been eroded from the TCCS budget over many years. Some of the things we will see that are new include citizen forums. Is this so that the minister can blame decisions on someone else, doesn't need to take responsibility for actions and new things that take place? We also see here long drawn-out investigations. We've seen from the minister during the estimates process a refusal to answer questions about a dog issue, yet a couple of hours later she provided additional information to the media, even though she was willing to avoid scrutiny of the Assembly's Estimates Committee. It appears to me, Madam Assistant Speaker, that here we have a minister in charge of city services who has no passion for this area. There's no commitment for this area, no vision for this area, and indeed, Madam Assistant Speaker, it seems she has no time for this area because she has too many other bright, shiny things to look after that give her a better photo opportunity than looking after basic local services. So let me start, Madam Assistant Speaker, by talking about dogs, something that this Assembly has faced over and over in the past few years. And we're seeing increasingly the concern in the community in relation to dog attacks. The RSPCA has said, and I can agree, there are no bad dogs, there are only irresponsible dog owners. And it's something that as a community we have to face. But the government also has a role to play in managing dangerous dogs and in better managing dangerous dogs. This community is not feeling safe to walk their own streets with or without their own dog on a leash. They're not feeling safe for their dogs in their own backyard or their cats in their own garage because of problems with roaming dogs, many of whom we hear have been previously reported to the correct authorities and yet have been released back to the community. It seems as though this minister would prefer to see more dog attacks and admit that she was wrong, about the need for stronger legislation in this area. And just yesterday, we had a Justice of the Supreme Court hand down a judgment that was scathing of the government's lack of action. I don't think I've ever seen such strong statements regarding the need for legislative reform in this area. Also yesterday, the same day as we saw this scathing comments about dog legislation, we saw another beloved family pet dog mauled to death in Tuggeranong.
Shame.
Another, literally, I've seen the photos, fluffy white dog, killed by 3 other roaming dogs. When will enough be enough? It's a serious matter and it's about public safety. We deserve to be safe in our own streets. We've heard in the past few months about Biscuit, who was mauled while being walked by his owners. We've heard about Jack. Yesterday it was Spuzz who was killed. We've also heard from the government's figures that in last year's data, 11% of urgent calls about dog attacks were abandoned. Urgent dog attacks abandoned. And in general calls to DAS about dogs, 62% were abandoned. This is quite shameful that we don't have the resources to address people calling about dog attacks. We've had a lot of questions in about funding for extra dog rangers. And it's been quite a difficult process to try and work out what's happened. We had an article in the Canberra Times in January which said that there was a ranger overseeing a team of 8 rangers, which went on to say next month, in a government funding hit, 8 new staff will come on board. The budget only had funding for 2 extra dog rangers, but it appears that 13 positions in DAS were advertised and 9 external staff were appointed. Of the 8 new positions, from what I can work out, 2 are ASO 3 operational support positions. 1 is an animal behaviourist ranger, which these positions are not field focused. Were these positions vacant before? Given that we had funding in the budget for 2 additional rangers, how have we recruited all of these additional staff? I must say, badly needed and welcomed additional staff, but doesn't mean that the area was so under-resourced in the past. It's a difficult area to work, and again, the ranger in the article back in January talked about being a first response officer and how difficult it is. But when you add lack of resources and support to that area, it makes that job almost untenable. It is such a difficult job, not just dealing with dangerous dogs, but dealing with the human aspect of it, whether it's injuries or taking someone's dog away. These are not easy matters. Also during estimates, we talked a bit about Izzy, the Maltese Terrier, who was euthanased by DAS less than 24 hours after going missing from her home in Canberra. Her owner had posted that she was lost on the DAS website. The Minister refused to answer questions about this during the Estimates Committee process. So I'm still unsure when the independent report on the death of Izzy will be released. How long did it take? How much longer will it take if it's not yet completed? How much did it cost? And why wasn't the Minister willing to answer questions at the time? Dogs are an issue that many Canberrans care very much about. Many of us have dogs ourselves. We love our dogs, but we expect to be safe, and when something goes wrong, we expect responsible, prompt action from the government. And this is a government that has been lacking in that area. I'd like to move on, Madam Assistant Speaker, to parking. It appears that indexing of fees has seen an increase in parking fees of 6%, and the extra revenue in car parking fees over the next 3 years is due just about completely, entirely due to the indexing of fees, because none of it is due to the increase in car parks, because of course the government is not providing any more. In fact, they're taking car parks away. So you're reducing the amount of this very valuable resource that people want to use and penalising them more and more, whilst making it more and more difficult to use public transport instead. It's a vicious circle. You get pinged if you use a car, you get pinged if you use a bus, because it's your time that suffers when you're going to use a bus. Time walking further, according to the new network, time walking further to a bus stop and walking further home again, and longer to get to your destination. It will no longer be a rapid network. It will be a frequent network perhaps, but certainly not rapid. And I've had many, many contacts from constituents saying that they will have to take a car because they just do not have the time to spend on these buses. And they have concerns about their children using public buses instead of school buses. Another thing I would like to speak briefly about is about the smell that can be smelt in some areas of Tuggeranong from time to time. This is certainly an area that has improved over time, but it is not eradicated. It still occurs. In fact, recently I had a constituent contact me to say, as instructed by the government. Take another 10 minutes. Thank you, Madam Assistant
Transport
Speaker.
Canberra City Services Part 1.4. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. Ms Lauder.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. On one occasion recently, a constituent of mine rang Access Canberra as instructed. The Minister likes these complaints to go through Access Canberra. I pass that on to my constituents. In this particular case, someone reported the odour in the morning to Access Canberra. 2 weeks later, they heard back from Access Canberra. 2 weeks later, they got an email back from Access Canberra saying, "Oh, we've just got your complaint and there's nothing we can do now because it was 2 weeks ago." Which makes perfect sense to them. They're not going to go out 2 weeks later and see if the odour is still there. But again, how does this help constituents dealing with an issue, whether it's a dog attack, whether it's the smell from the tip, whether it's any other of the myriad of local complaints people have? When they feel they're doing the right thing, they're ringing and reporting the issue, and somehow it's lost in the never. Is it a system issue? Is it a resourcing issue? Perhaps it's just a lack of interest issue. I'm really not sure. On to playgrounds, Madam Assistant Speaker. Playgrounds are another thing that I increasingly hear about from constituents. Partly this is because in my electorate in particular, it's an area that's been around for quite some time and people are looking for renewal of the playgrounds in their area. There are some new families moving into those suburbs, but also there are grandparents who are having caring responsibility of their grandchildren and like to go out to local playgrounds. The government has committed to citizen forums to make decisions on priorities for urban services, including a lot of money allocated towards playgrounds. I'm not sure how a necessarily small citizens group is going to be able to better balance competing needs across our suburbs and over time than people whose full-time job it is to look at these issues. How much real flexibility will the citizens' forums really have? Or is it just the government walking away from their responsibilities? Last year, it appears that only 5 playgrounds were upgraded. At that rate, it will take decades on current budgets before